If you're watching this video and it's October or November, Bodyworker's Brew is here. And if you're like me and you love everything pumpkin spice, this is the smell of joy brought to your practice. If you're watching this video and it's not October or November, the Rebel Sampler is perfect if you want to try a little butter, take a little butter on the go, or give a little butter to your favorite massage therapist. I'm using Game of Bones Total Meltdown Body Butter today because it's good for bones, good for arthritis, and gentle on the skin. My hand model today is none other than my mom. And before I get started, I just want to point out that her first finger, which may appear to be arthritic, is not the one that's painful. She's feeling it in the distal interphalangeal joints of her thumb and her fourth and her fifth fingers. So just a friendly reminder that looks can be deceiving, and you want to ask all the necessary questions before you start. You might be able to see here that she's having a hard time making a fist with her right hand. And my goal when working with arthritis is not to fix that, but to help manage that just a little bit and help ease the pain. That being said, while I warm up my mom's hands and forearms, I just want to remind you that I'm a massage therapist who happened to put a couple of videos up on YouTube. I'm not a rheumatologist or an orthopedic doctor or a doctor for anything for that matter, but I do understand muscles and connective tissue. And when it comes to arthritis, what we as massage therapists are dealing with is the soft tissue that surrounds the arthritic joint. If you are suffering from arthritis, there are lots of options to support the lifestyle that you want to live. Please make sure that you do your own research and find the best answers that are right for you. So I've started this work with my mom into the muscles of her forearm, and you may notice that I'm only supporting her hand very gently with my right hand. That's because where arthritis hurts can be so severely painful that you want to avoid direct contact onto those hot spots. There are lots of different types of arthritis, and most of them involve a slow degeneration of the joint accompanied by inflammation and pain. And like I said before, we can't go in and fix the joint, but what we can do is help the guarded tissue to relax and ease their grip on these bones. The work I'm doing in this video is going to seem really boring, relatively speaking, because the approach around arthritis should be gentle and slow. Like the work I'm doing here in the wrist involves a gentle grasp onto either side of the wrist and the hand, and slowly pulling and creating space through the carpals and slowly working my way down into the hand. If you've ever come across a pile of old photographs that you had in your closet and they're stuck together and you want to separate them out, it can be really tedious to try to make that happen and keep their integrity at the same time. And I want you to think about this work like that. Not necessarily that it's tedious, but that it's very slow going and that your patience is the key factor. I'm not really doing anything fancy here other than compressing into the soft tissue around the base of the thumb and then slowly tractioning through each joint, peeling apart those photographs and trying to maintain their integrity. If you recall, one of the joints that was irritated with my mom's hand was the distal interphalangeal joint of her thumb, and then also her fourth and fifth finger, but I'm working on her thumb right now, and it's really hard to see, but any pressure that I'm applying is going to be on the phalanges themselves and not on the joint. So all I'm doing here is sliding very lightly over the joints, grabbing onto the more proximal bone, then the more distal bone, and just creating some very slow movement and traction. There are a lot of theories about how to help arthritis, and one of them is that movement creates production of synovial fluid, and synovial fluid is the fluid within a joint that helps it to stay lubricated. When a joint has arthritis, it doesn't want to move, and therefore it doesn't produce synovial fluid. So sometimes movement can really help, and creating passive movement with your client's joints can be beneficial. But there are also types of arthritis where that fluid itself gets inflamed, like gout, which most commonly affects the big toe. In this instance, an overproduction of synovial fluid is not a good thing. So you want to be in communication with your client and gain a solid understanding about what feels relieving and what doesn't. As I work with my mom's fingers, I'm continuing the work into the soft tissue and avoiding direct pressure into the joints, but consistently tractioning through and trying to create space. The one thing that is consistent is that arthritis creates a buildup, and that buildup can create a pain response, and that pain response can turn back around and create more buildup. So tractioning through a joint, opening up the joint, creating space in the joint is going to improve the blood flow and the nerve flow a little bit, and at the same time allow the muscles and the tendons to breathe. Some of you may have noticed that as I've been talking about arthritis, I use the word degenerative and I also use the words buildup. And those two words conflict, but they're both true when it comes to arthritic pain. The space that I'm trying to create when I work with a client who suffers from arthritis is about easing the constriction around a joint that can happen when the connective tissue and the padding within the joint deteriorates or degenerates, and you get that painful sandpaper bone-on-bone friction when a joint tries to move. Or the constriction comes from an inflammatory response that creates an outgrowth with the bone, and bone spurs begin to appear. This is an effort the bones make to fuse together and create more stability. And in reality, both of these things are happening simultaneously. A deterioration of the padding and a buildup of the bone tissue make it difficult and very painful for a joint to move. I've paid a little extra attention to my mom's thumb, and now I'm onto her ring finger and her pinky, which are the other two fingers that she's experiencing arthritic pain in. If you remember, they're in the distal joints, so down closer to the fingernail. And as I work my way down, I'm continuing to use compressions, but sliding very lightly over the joint that is arthritic. At the very end of her finger, I'm applying a little more compression into the finger pad and the nail bed, and adding a little bit of traction at the end. As I repeat this work into my mom's pinky, I want to remind you that this can vary greatly from client to client. There are over 100 arthritic conditions, so you want to make sure that you're getting the right feedback about what feels relieving to this client in this moment. So aside from being slow and methodical and gentle and peeling those pictures apart one by one, carefully and intricately, you can also do a lot of work that's around the arthritic joint to support the soft tissue and bones that support this problematic area. In this instance, that area is the fingers, and so I want to do my best to support the hand. Right now, I've got my fingers into the palm of her hand, and I'm very carefully separating her metacarpals away from each other, using an alternating backward and forward motion, and this is just going to help loosen up more of that soft tissue and help that blood flow make its way to the fingers. I'm also, in this instance, offering a little extra love into the hypothenar eminence at the base of the pinky, where there are about 3 or 4 muscles that influence what this finger does, depending on who you talk to, and then also into the thenar eminence at the base of the thumb, where there are about 4 or 5 muscles that influence what that digit does, depending on who you talk to. If you want to get really fancy, you can start using your knuckles instead of your thumb so that you don't get arthritis in the long run. And you can start digging a little deeper for trigger points, which often show up with guarding patterns around issues like arthritis. Side note, if you find one, try not to dig too deep and work through that trigger point too fast. Applying pain on pain is not always the best idea. You also might want to try playing around with some form of a muscle energy technique. So in this instance, I'm sinking into the intrinsic muscles of the thenar eminence on the palmar side, and I'm having my mom curl her thumb down towards her palm. This is going to engage these muscles while I'm pressing in, and sometimes this can be really effective with arthritis. If it's too painful, you don't want to push them too far, but a gentle engagement of these muscles can wake things up a bit and help invigorate the whole area. The last option I'm going to offer for this video is some passive range of motion, which in the distal interphalangeal joint of the thumb just looks like a little bit of flexion and extension at the end of the thumb. Again, this might not be right for your client, and some of you may be watching this and thinking, oh my gosh, that would hurt so much, but sometimes it can actually bring a lot of relief. So talk to your client, find out what works for them, and go from there.